In May of 2007, a reindeer herder named Yuri Kuti was walking a frozen riverbank in the far north of Siberia when he saw something dark, half buried in the mud at the water's edge. At first, he took it for a dead reindeer calf. Then he got closer and saw a trunk, then two small ears and reddish hair still clinging to the skin. It was a baby woolly mammoth. She had died around 42,000 years ago, and she had come out of the permafrost so complete that her skin was intact, her organs were intact, and traces of her mother's milk were still inside her stomach. They named her Lyuba. She did not look like a fossil. She looked like an animal that had died the winter before. And here is the strange, cruel part. They had her body. They had her flesh, her hair, her face, her DNA. And they still could not bring her back because the genetic code inside her cells had shattered long ago into millions of broken fragments, far too damaged to ever build a living animal from. For all that the ice had saved of her, the one thing that mattered was gone. Then, in the spring of 2025, a company in Texas revealed a handful of laboratory mice covered in thick golden fur and said those mice were a step toward putting living mammoth calves on the Earth by 2028. The question stopped being whether anyone could make something that looked like a mammoth. The question became whether that animal would actually be one. This is the most ambitious attempt to reverse an extinction that anyone has ever seriously funded. This is how close it really is, and the uncomfortable thing waiting underneath it, which is whether the creature they are building will be a mammoth at all. Start with what the woolly mammoth was, because it was one of the great animals of the last ice age. Mammuthus primigenius, a giant of the frozen north, roughly the size of a modern African elephant, but wrapped for the cold, covered in a shaggy double coat of hair, packed with fat, with small ears and a short tail to keep from losing heat, and long curved tusks it used to sweep snow off the grass it ate. It emerged in Siberia hundreds of thousands of years ago and spread across the entire top of the world, across Europe, across Asia, across North America, in herds, in enormous numbers. It shared the world with early humans, who painted it on cave walls and hunted it with spears. And then, as the Ice Age ended and the world warmed and the herds were hunted, it vanished. The mainland populations died out around 10,000 years ago. A final shrinking group clung to life on a remote island in the Arctic Ocean until roughly 4,000 years ago, and then they too were gone, and the mammoth became what it has been ever since. An icon of extinction, the picture of something gone forever. The way the very last of them went out is still not understood, and it is stranger than the story most people have been told. That final population was marooned on Wrangel Island in the frozen Arctic Ocean, cut off when the sea rose, and it began with almost nothing. The genetics suggest the whole island population descended from as few as 8 animals. They were inbred. They lost most of their genetic diversity. For a long time, the assumption was that this doomed them, that they slowly came apart from the inside under the weight of their own damaged genes. But when researchers sequenced 21 mammoth genomes and looked closely, that is not what they found. The population recovered fast, climbing to 200 or 300 animals within about 20 generations, and then it held steady for 6,000 years. Mildly harmful mutations did build up over time, but the worst ones were being weeded out, purged generation after generation, the way a small population sometimes cleans its own genome. These animals were not sliding toward an inevitable end. They were stable, and they stayed stable for longer than all of recorded human history. And then, abruptly, they were gone. The researchers who did that work now say plainly that they can reject the old idea that the mammoths were simply doomed for genetic reasons, and that something else, something sudden, must have collapsed the population. A disease, a brutal season, a single bad event landing on a small, isolated herd with no margin left to absorb it. Nobody knows. And the reason nobody knows yet is almost unbearable. That study had no DNA from the final 300 years of the population's life. Those remains have since been dug out of the ice, and the sequencing is planned. The answer to how the last mammoths on Earth actually died is sitting in a lab right now waiting to be read. Which brings us to the company that refuses to let the story end there. Colossal Biosciences, based in Dallas, founded in 2021 by an entrepreneur named Ben Lamb and the Harvard geneticist George Church, now valued at more than $10 billion. Colossal exists to bring extinct animals back, and the woolly mammoth is the flagship, the animal the whole company was built around. And they have put a date on it. They intend to have their first mammoth calves on the ground by 2028. The way they plan to do it is not what the movies taught you, because you cannot clone a mammoth. We covered why with Lyuba. Even the best preserved body in the world holds DNA that is broken into countless tiny useless pieces, and no amount of frozen skin changes that. And people have been pulling these remains out of the ground for a very long time. As the permafrost thaws, whole tusks surface intact, so many of them that there is a real, centuries-old trade in mammoth ivory dug straight out of the Siberian earth. So Colossal is not cloning anything. They started instead with the mammoth's closest living relative, the Asian elephant, which shares something like 99.6% of its DNA with the mammoth, and is closer to the mammoth than it is to the African elephant. Do not let that number fool you into thinking the job is nearly done. That last sliver of a percent is still millions of individual differences in the code, shaping hundreds of traits. The plan is to take a living Asian elephant and edit it, rewriting the specific genes that made a mammoth, the shaggy hair, the thick fat, the cold-adapted blood, the small ears, until you have an elephant carrying the traits of the Ice Age giant. Then grow that edited cell into an embryo and carry it to term. That is what the golden mice were about, though it is worth being honest about exactly how big a step they were. Colossal calls them the woolly mouse. It sounds like a joke, and it looks like one, ordinary lab mice with thick warm coats, two of them named Chip and Dale. It was not a joke. The team made several precise gene edits at once, targeting traits tied to the mammoth's cold adaptations, its long hair, and the way it stored fat. And the mice came out healthy and wearing exactly the coat they were built to wear. But the headlines skipped the catch. Those mice proved you can make a batch of coordinated edits and get the traits you intended in a mouse. They were never tested against real Arctic cold, so they did not prove the animals were actually adapted to survive it. And they said nothing about the far harder half of the plan, which is making, implanting, and delivering an edited elephant. The mouse showed the edits work. It said nothing about whether a mammoth can be born, because between a woolly mouse and a woolly mammoth sits a wall of problems big enough that a lot of scientists think 2028 is a fantasy. A mouse is pregnant for about 20 days. An elephant is pregnant for 22 months, nearly 2 years, the longest pregnancy of any land animal on Earth. No elephant calf has ever been born through the full IVF process this project would need. The technique is routine in cattle and in people, and it has never once carried an elephant all the way to a birth, so Colossal has to invent it from nothing. Then they have to take an edited embryo, implant it into a surrogate Asian elephant, itself an endangered animal you cannot freely experiment on, and hope a cloned pregnancy holds for 2 years, when cloning fails far more often than it works. An artificial womb has been floated as an eventual way around the surrogate, but nothing capable of carrying an elephant through nearly 2 years of development exists, or is anywhere close. Each of those is a problem no one has solved. They are trying to solve all of them at once, against a clock. And then, there is the deepest question, the one hanging over the whole project, and it has already caught up with them once. Even if it all works, even if a calf is born in 2028, will it be a mammoth? Look at what that animal actually is. An Asian elephant with some number of mammoth genes edited in. It is not the animal that walked the Ice Age tundra. It carries that animal's traits, the hair, the fat, the tolerance for cold, but underneath it is overwhelmingly elephant. The critics have a blunt name for it. A calf born to an elephant, carrying a scattering of mammoth genes, is not a resurrected mammoth. It is a gene-edited elephant in a mammoth costume. And this is not just outsiders taking shots. Colossal's own chief scientist, an evolutionary biologist, said out loud in 2025, talking about the company's dire wolves, that it is simply impossible to bring back an organism identical to a species that used to be alive. The head scientist of the de-extinction company, admitting that true resurrection cannot be done. What they can build is a functional copy, something that looks and lives like the lost animal, but will never be the thing that died. So when Colossal says they will bring the mammoth back, They mean something slipperier than it sounds. They mean they will build something new that does the mammoth's job. So why chase it at all if the honest version is a cold, adapted elephant and not a true mammoth? The company's answer is bigger than nostalgia, and it is the part most people miss. First, the entire toolkit they have to invent to pull this off. Elephant IVF, ways to keep elephant embryos alive, ways to widen the genetic diversity of a species down to its last few, could directly help save the Asian elephant itself, an endangered animal with fewer than 50,000 left. The living species might be rescued by the effort to copy the dead one. Second, and stranger, there is a real scientific argument that herds of big grazing animals once kept the Arctic tundra healthy, trampling the snow, knocking down trees, keeping the frozen ground frozen, and that putting something mammoth-like back into the far north could help hold the permafrost in place, the same permafrost that preserved Lyuba, and that is now thawing and releasing greenhouse gases. In the far northeast of Siberia, there is already a place called Pleistocene Park, where researchers have spent years releasing bison, horses, and other big grazers onto the tundra to rebuild the lost Ice Age grassland. The one animal that park is missing, the one that shaped that whole ecosystem more than any other, is the mammoth. But hold the honest distance here, because this is the grandest claim Colossal makes, and the one with the least behind it. Even if big grazing herds really can change snow and soil, and there is decent evidence they can, that is a long way from proving a handful of engineered elephants would meaningfully slow the thaw of the entire Arctic. To even test it, you would not need one calf. You would need healthy breeding herds spread across huge stretches of the far north, living there for generations. One animal in a facility does nothing for the permafrost. The vision is real and staggering in scale, and almost completely unproven. Which is the whole tell. The mammoth, for Colossal, is not really the point. The mammoth is the moonshot that forces them to invent everything else along the way. And there is one more problem, maybe the worst of them, and almost nobody talks about it. Say it all works. The editing is clean, the pregnancy holds, a calf is born. That calf would be born completely alone. No mammoth mother to raise it the way a mammoth mother would, no herd around it, no older animals to copy. Because a mammoth was never only a body and a coat and a set of genes. A mammoth was a deeply social animal, like the elephants it grew up beside, and elephants are not born knowing how to be elephants. They are taught. Where the water is, which paths to walk in the dry season, how to raise a calf of their own, how to grieve their dead, how to speak in the low rumble the herd uses, under the range of human hearing. All of it handed down, mother to calf, across generations, a culture as much as a species. And all of it is gone. It died with the last real mammoths. So even a perfect calf would be a mammoth in body and an orphan in every other way, an animal wearing the shape of something ancient with no one left alive to teach it how to be that thing. You can rebuild the animal from the code. You cannot rebuild what it knew, which flips the entire question around. Even if it looks like a mammoth and moves like a mammoth, who was left on Earth to teach it how to be one. So the honest shape of it does not settle into a clean yes or no. Nobody has brought back a mammoth. Right now, there is no mammoth and no confirmed mammoth embryo, just a company with a fortune, a serious team, a cage of woolly mice, and a date on the calendar that plenty of good scientists expect to slip. The hardest problems in the plan are the ones still unsolved, and even in the best case, the animal at the end of it will be, by the company's own admission, not quite a mammoth. And still, they keep going, because they have already made animals people swore could not be made, and engineered Ice Age traits into living creatures, and they have the money and the science and the nerve, and they are aimed straight at the most audacious biological goal anyone has ever set. So the real question was never whether they can build a perfect mammoth. They have told you they cannot. The real question is what it means when, a few years from now, something huge and shaggy and built for the cold, something the world has not seen in 10,000 years, takes its first breath inside a breeding facility. A mammoth, a miracle, or a very cold elephant with the ghost of an extinct animal stitched into its genes. Nobody can agree. And the animal that would end the argument has not been born yet. So it ends where it began, in the frozen ground of the far north, where the real mammoths still lie in the ice, patient and perfect. Their hair and their skin and their last meals, held exactly as they were on the day the world warmed and walked away from them. For 10,000 years, they have meant gone forever. And now, for the first time, a company worth more than $10 billion is betting that forever has an expiration date, and that somewhere in that ancient frozen flesh is the blueprint for walking the giants of the Ice Age back into a world that already buried them.